Right here, Question Period Canada. Hopefully everybody's having a great day. We're going to be checking out some Canadian federal politics. There's a summit on auto theft that's taking place right now. And so we're not going to waste too much time. We're going to jump right into that. And then we're going to take a look also. Right away, we'll be taking a look at what's going on in the state of Canadian television in that sector. So we'll start off with that, and then we'll get into the Auto Summit. So let's jump right in.
All right. Hi, everyone. Great to see you all for this
kind of far away.
Final powerhouse panel to wrap prime time. And because everyone in this room has absolutely no need for introductions to the people on the stage, I'm going to dispense with bios. I'm even going to dispense with titles. And I'm just going to go from one end of the stage to the other. Also because in the pre-call, it was clear we have a very rich conversation. So I just want to get to it as quickly as humanly possible. So starting at the far end, we've got Justin Stockman from Bell Media. We have Val Creighton from the Canada Media Fund. We have Colette Watson from Rogers Sports and Media, Catherine Tate from CBC Radio-Canada, and Monica Ile, APTN. How about a warm applause to welcome them to the stage? So it's so great to have you here. Thank you for doing this. And here's where I propose we begin, picking up on what Elaine just said. My sense in the hallways and in the conversations we've been having at primetime over the past couple of days is the industry feels that we're, I'll call it, in a transitional phase. And sort of in a lot of different ways. From an industry perspective, shifting business models, the outcome of what happened in the US this past year with the strikes, and of course, Bill C-11 that got adopted. There was great drama, as you'll all recall, last year at this very time when the bill got adopted by the Senate. We had CRTC hearings phase 1 in the fall. And so now we're sort of in a little bit of a waiting game. And at the same time, no one is waiting because everyone still has to do what they do. And so I want to get I'm going to put this in it elegantly, a bit of a gut check from each of you in terms of where we're at right now, where we're going, particularly when sort of looked at in the Bill C-11 context, what you're hoping to see come out of this process now that it really, truly has begun. So Val, is it okay if I ask you to kick things off?
Ask Justin, he's got notes. No, I'm happy to start. Okay. Well, I am pretty optimistic overall, Reynolds. I mean, I think there's no denying that it's really tough out there. So let's not go there. Everybody knows, you're all living it, whether it's in this business or in your personal lives. It's rough. But I think what I see from our observation at the CMF is always so inspiring and encouraging when you see content creators do what they do. And so I'm really optimistic. I mean, I guess my view on C-11, obviously, you know the position we took at the hearing. We don't need to talk about that. But they're doing what they're doing. The CRTC is doing its job. The government gave pretty good policy direction to the CRTC. So that's unfolding. There isn't a whole lot we can do about that, except intervene and listen and learn and whatever. So for us, I think I'm always kind of a glass half full, and I'm quite excited about what the future will bring. I mean, we see content from creators that have never had access to the CMF before. That content is traveling around the world. Our department in what's called ED&I is growth and inclusion, because we talk about growth of story, growth of idea, growth of creators, growth of audience, and hopefully revenue growth. So I'm pretty excited about it. I mean, I think if there was ever a frustration, you know, generally in this country, we have a hard time coming all together to present a particular position about what our industry is, its importance to the country, the jobs it creates, its impact on the GDP. And we didn't really do that with the interventions at C-11. Everybody went up and pitched their self-interest, for lack of a better word, position to get what they needed. That's understandable. That's human nature. But when I look around this room and the people I've talked to in the last couple of days, and even the people on this
doesn't
panel,
make sense to me.
there is so much experience and intelligence in this industry.
It doesn't
that
match
just
the
think if we
delivery.
ever got together as a powerhouse of messaging to decision
what's up?
makers all over the world, what that might look like. So that's my hope out of this whole process. You know, sure, we hope it's going to be good and the right people will get the right money, but that's not controllable.
What's up, buddy?
But if we can come together and celebrate what this industry is, it is not the same as it was yesterday, 5 years ago, 10 years ago, pick one. It's an entirely different business. These guys are the experts on the downward pressure on the broadcast system in Canada. So that's all true. But I think there's something bigger than that. And my hope would be that we get our shit together and start doing it right. Sorry, I did promise you I wouldn't swear. Do you need anything more than that? That's good?
That was great. Thank you, Val. And maybe at some point in this conversation, we can circle back on that in terms of your thoughts, the panel's thoughts on what those common positions, high level, might look like, right? So who would like to leap in next?
I'll say something.
Catherine.
I totally agree with Valerie's point about the opportunity to speak with one voice. I thought that the foreign streamers in the first phase were very, very persuasive.
Yep.
And that's a problem for all of us. So I would just say Valerie's being highly political in the sense that she, you know, call it what it is. They were amazingly well prepared, and they had one single message that if they're spending money here, they think they're doing it and it should count. And we're all there going, well, we need this for this group and we need this for this group. And the reality is, if we don't, in this next second phase, and I think there's an opportunity coming up right now in the Canadian content workshops that the CRTC is holding. This is the opportunity to talk really clearly in a unified voice about why it matters to own the content that we produce and why it matters to have a domestic industry for Canadian content as opposed to a foreign-owned Canadian content industry. So that's the opportunity.
Monica.
I was just saying hello, and I'm very happy to be with you here today. And I just want to bring about the Indigenous perspective on all of this. So as you look at what's happening with C11, in the Indigenous side, there was so much progress that has been made. So if you look back at the Broadcasting Act of 1991, when they talked about Indigenous programming, is as resources become available. So Indigenous was not part of the broadcasting system, but now you have recognition of Indigenous people, Indigenous languages at the same level as French and English in the broadcast industry, and Indigenous programming undertakings. So, but with these recognition comes responsibilities, right? We need to step up to those responsibilities. But hopefully with this recognition, you also have resources and support. So that's where I find there's work still that needs to be done on the Indigenous side. So we're there, more and more Indigenous people, we're taking our place, we're speaking our voice, we're telling our stories. We collaborate with others to do so as well. But we need more, so I feel the foundation is there, but now we need to build on that foundation.
Colette, thoughts?
There is no free press anymore, I don't think, Insulator.
Unifying is a good goal to have. We sometimes lose sight of the big picture with our small divisions. At the end of the day, the world is changing around us. We can either evolve and change with it or be left behind. But know for a fact that it is changing. And like Val, my glass is typically half full. So it's an opportunity to make the next evolution of the system work for us. We can agree to find ways to work together. I think we can all agree Canada needs a public broadcaster. We can all agree Canada needs strong Indigenous programming. Canada needs diverse programming in a variety of languages and a strong production sector. Canada also needs a strong news sector. I'm worried about that part. We've not talked enough about local news and Canadian national news. And what is the role of each of us in that new world? We can go carve it out now as part of this, or have it imposed on us. I kind of like the first option.
Canadian content wouldn't exist if it wasn't for regulation, and I don't think we should fool ourselves that no matter how business savvy we are, we wouldn't have what we have today if regulation hadn't helped protect us because of where we live and who we live next to and the languages we speak, etc. And so I do see a fork in the road where if this goes badly, I think it could be very bad for everyone involved, and it's hard to not focus on that when you have a chance to maybe change it. And so I want to be positive, but I do, oh, it's still not working. I like this better.
There, that's what
I want to be positive, but I see one version of the world where Canadian content will be a challenge existing. Producers will have a challenge owning their IP. A lot of service production for external markets, which is that's not Canadian culture. If I'm positive, we've already lost collectively, we've lost 50% of our market share to the global streamers since regulation stopped covering everyone here. And we still have a chance to stop that bleed if it goes well. We can freeze it at 50. I don't think we're gaining anything back. And work out a system where sort of the three important Canadian stakeholders can have what we need, which would be audiences, the content distributors, us, and
Just
the
the
producers.
liberals, I
And
think, here.
we have to find something that all three of those parties win, or else this didn't go right. And so I'm just very focused on how do we influence these next stages to ensure that we can be positive and we actually are able to see a positive outcome for Canada out of this.
And just to pick up on your point there, Justin, in terms of partnership, because one of the questions I think is going to be, whatever this ultimately looks like, you now have the foreign streamers who are very much a part of our market, as you pointed out. They will have obligations of some kind. So in that world, there is a scenario where there's also going to be competition for Canadian content as between you and the big foreign players, potentially. And at the same time, maybe opportunities for partnership. So I would love to hear on both of those things, sort of the competitive angle, but also the potential collaborative angles. Broadcasters in Canada, streamers in Canada, foreign streamers, and producers. Your thoughts on that?
When was the last time you had a partnership with a 400-ton gorilla?
Our members do it every day of the week, as a matter of fact.
I really think let's be really clear. The partnership, yes, we all, and by the way, in the English language market, we've all been partnering for years. You can't make a show in English Canada without financing from the UK or from the US or from a streamer. Like, that's just the reality. But we also know as broadcasters that when you enter into a partnership, first thing that comes off is your logo. Second thing that I have to read in the paper is that Netflix is launching a show in Iqaluit that we developed and that we've all financed. And oh yes, they come in with a big check. It was fantastic. But let's just be clear, the partnership is not necessarily an easy one. And you make those decisions because you have limited resources and you want to stretch the dollars and you absolutely want to get that comedy made with an Inuit creative crew that you've never had before. So of course partnership is appealing, but I say real partnership is where all parties have the same vested interest, and that's almost impossible when you're talking about companies that have a single purpose, which is to maximize revenue on a global scale. That's not our business model. Now, if we had a different structure where domestic broadcasters were able to exploit rights, and I know a number of private broadcasters would like to have that flexibility. I mean, we also have to be open to changing what the rules that we've put in place around our broadcasters in order to be more effective in a global marketplace, I would say. So there are a lot, and I think I see the back of Doug Barrett's head, there are a lot of us who've been around for a long time in this industry, policymakers who've fought for policy. When you talk about the years of regulation, I started my career here in Ottawa, doing that work. And we came up with all of those rules and all of that regulation, and for sure it needs to be changed. I don't doubt it, Valerie. We need to rip off the Band-Aid and think more creatively around the rules. But remember, the best deal is the deal where both people win. And I'm not sure that's possible with these large players.
I'm going to build on that. So as a commercial private broadcaster and a large distribution company, I found it interesting that in phase one, we were the only ones who showed up as a vertically integrated company, because I do believe some of those solutions lay there, right, in terms of vertically integrated companies working. For those of you in the audience who are producers, competition feels like a lottery win, right? Like, this is awesome. And I think putting words in Catherine's mouth is be careful what you wish for, because it is hard to negotiate with some of these groups. That said, there's no way around it. We need to be partners with each other, with them, us with them, us with you, all three of us together. And the current framework doesn't allow for that, which is why it's a great opportunity in my mind to create a framework that will serve us. The last Broadcasting Act is, I don't know, I'll lose track of time now, it's 35 years old, let's say. I don't think the C11 is going to last 35 years. This industry is changing so rapidly that we need to create a flexible opportunity, a flexible framework that allows for future evolution. And so while we sometimes sit on opposite sides of the table, I think we have the same goals, Val and I. It's to create more Canadian programming that audiences want to watch. We are a commercial broadcaster. I live and die by advertising revenue. And that means people have to want to watch the shows we produce. And that's the kind of flexibility we are going to look for.
That's quite interesting. I'm going to bring it back to another level for the smaller independent broadcasters. We're not market-driven. We're servicing a population that is underrepresented. So we don't have that market power. So it's really hard for us when we get into partnership and saying, well, we want this, we want that. We can't invest much money, unfortunately. So that's why we also rely with partners, Canadian partners, I'm looking at you guys, exactly, to help us. And as a public broadcaster, well, that's also one of your roles, to help and support Indigenous
Hey, Spawny, what's up?
production companies, Indigenous broadcasters. But it's not easy. But I do agree you need that flexibility. And I do hope that those larger streamers see the value in doing this, and we're not taking anything away from them. I don't see it as when AP10 says yes to a show. I don't see, okay, I'm putting my logo on it. I'm seeing that I'm giving this producer this opportunity to tell their stories and giving them a platform so these stories will be heard, so those stories will bring change or bring reflection or entertainment, whatever. That's how I see it. That's how I see it doing things. Maybe it's a way for smaller independent broadcasters' way of thinking, but for me, I think that pushed the dial even further, and it just brings good out of it.
You have the luxury of a strong culture. Canada, we fight a behemoth every day. Fight's the wrong word. We compete against American English language television. And you would, as those of you who produce English language television would know how hard it is to pierce through that. So I envy French Canada, and I envy you for the built-in cultural structure.
But it's interesting you're saying a strong culture. A lot of our culture has been taken away from us. Our language.
Yeah.
And when you lose your language, you lose a part of our identity. And I think right now, amongst Indigenous people, we're reclaiming that identity. We're reclaiming our language, our storytelling.
And that's a beautiful thing that you do.
It is a beautiful thing. And APTN's been doing this for 25 years now, and before TVNC. And I think
your video, Brent. It was good.
I was going to say, what people don't necessarily understand is that we're working hard on it. It's not a given to do so, and we need to partner with one another internally to be able to do that. And within Canada, we say the word Indigenous, but that's a big umbrella word. I mean, First Nation, Métis, Inuit. Within the First Nations, there's so many differences.
And languages.
And more than 70 languages. So it's a challenge every day to do so. But I would say, you could get inspired of the way we're doing this, but you have sometimes, I feel, more of our culture than we have of our culture, right?
Oh.
So it's a struggle.
But I think that one of the good things about C11 is the identification of Canadian content and Indigenous content. And this will be very interesting to see how that plays out. And it's an opportunity. And it's an opportunity for us, the other broadcasters, to amplify this Indigenous content. Plug for CBC Radio-Canada. We're launching our first national Indigenous strategy at the Human Rights Museum in Winnipeg on Monday. Tune in. It'll be live streamed.
Justin and then Val.
On the partnership point, I working with non-streamers partnerships work really well for us. We partner with APTN on a bunch of different series. We partner with U.S. broadcasters in the traditional space. Often, our challenge with the streamers up to this point, I'm so negative, is that we've sort of been screwed when we have partnered. We've had now 3 productions I can think of off the top of my head where we developed them for years, we worked together. We don't want to be relegated just to the declining linear space. We have a streamer. And at the 11th hour on each of these projects, those rights have suddenly been snatched away from us. And it's like, you can have CTV with your declining audience, but you can't have Crave. And we're going to take Crave globally, which doesn't work for us. That's not our business model. We're trying to transition to a digital space. And we get our money back, but we lose 2 years of work or 3 years of work. It puts pressure on the producer because usually these deals are the streamer sort of giving them you're in or you're out and they don't want to say no to these global streamers who have way more leverage than we do. And it's been a pretty negative experience up to this point. And so I was happy that when we started to see the policy direction coming together, there was mentions of partnerships. And when we went and spoke with the CRTC, we were trying to highlight that as I don't know how we do this as Little Canada versus the world without some sort of partnership, but we are going to need legislation. We can't, I don't think just business dynamics are going to get us there because Bell, it's weird to say Bell is small because Bell feels pretty big, but in this, compared to the world, Bell is small. And we are trapped in Canada's borders and we don't have any leverage when it just comes to straight business negotiations.
Well, maybe we ask that domestic streaming rights, in order to access whatever funds flow from C11, hopefully they flow to a well-established and well-run Canada Media Fund, and we make domestic streaming rights be a requirement, that they're held by Canadian broadcasters.
That sounds like a good idea.
Yeah, well, Catherine, it almost sounds like terms of trade for broadcasters. And that's always the way it is, right? That's always the way it is. It's that now that there are even bigger players in the system, all of a sudden, there's this appetite for certain kinds of regulatory protections, while at the same time existing less regulation as you go down the food chain where you have the more powerful bargaining position. Anyway, that's my one editorial for today. But Valerie, over to you.
Is that the first time you've said terms of trade in this conference?
I was going to say.
It's a prime time tradition. It's like, well, Catherine set me up, so I had to.
This panel, I think, was called Phoenix Rising, and I found that quite interesting because 2 or 3 people here have mentioned the issue of flexibility. Well, that's what we've fought for about the last 10 years, is flexibility in the system. Because our observation is exactly what Justin spoke to and Catherine, as the downward pressure hit the broadcasters over the last 10 years, their ability to do what they do well has lessened in terms of financial resources. It's as simple as that. They're out there fighting the fight. They're trying to survive. There are different business models amongst them. So we have more flexibility now. We don't have to get into all of it, but it's been about 10 years that we finally convinced the government that this model we have, this structure, and the constriction at the CMF will not hold. It just won't last. It has nothing really to do with the streamers. It has to do even how we make content in this country in the domestic market. So there's some really interesting flexibility points. I can talk about them later or now. But we're hoping it will help us collectively with the broadcasters. Because what I really love is when we put close to sometimes equivalent money into a show with a broadcaster as a good partner, it becomes their money. Even the Iqaluit, like we have a ton of money in there too, but it's always CBC, AP10, and Netflix. Wow. Well, I'm sorry, but yeah, smarten up, Catherine. So, you know, it's a conversation we've had with the broadcasters for a long time, and some are very good at because the point of it is, the money we get comes from public decision makers and people who are not necessarily in the market. So if you want to keep getting finances through the Government of Canada, you're similar, and through those sources, you know, it's good to recognize them. We have the BDU money, we have the government money, and we work very hard at recognizing our two partners everywhere we go. But I think without the flexibility and a mindset to figure out how to embrace that flexibility, I'm not going to dispute what you said about the toughness on the negotiations. But the streamers are here. That barn door is open.
Yeah.
So how can we collect? I mean, it's great they're here. Look what they do in service production. It's an important part of the entire Canadian ecosystem. It's just not the only part. So our fight too is on the domestic side, because the structure is a mess from our perspective. However, the creativity, we are blessed with creativity in this country. I will say, on the Indigenous front, we now will be able to allow Indigenous producers from the north to work across the north, because there is no north-south. That's just a myth if you think there's a north-south relationship. Those producers up there most of the time can't even get a phone call. Where's Pablo and those guys from, oh, there they are over there. Those people always make me feel really good. I'm so glad I ran into them before this panel started. So we will be able to, if a producer in Iqaluit, and there are two examples now, is working with the producer in Greenland, and there's Norwegian money in it, they will be able to access the CMF. This is a pilot, and it's opening the door to some different models. We're very focused on kids and docs right now because it's collapsing, not doc series, but POV docs and one-off docs, and the kids' content that traditionally was financed through the CMF is disappearing. So we just had 2 days of board stuff before this conference talking about what to do about that. And we can't figure that out alone. We'll be talking to the industry over the next year. We'll be talking to the broadcasters to look at these, because it's not that kids' content isn't successful around the world. It is. But last year when I was at Kids Screen, those Canadian producers said it's not Canada who's financing our content primarily. It's Europe and other countries, because from a number of reasons that we don't need to get into, but it's still part of the future of this country in terms of, and of course, kids aren't on linear TV. We have a partnership with the Shaw Rocket Fund, a little show called Dennis and Me, 32 million views of kids on YouTube. That's where the audience is. So in that genre, it's an audience. You have to follow where that audience is, because they're primarily, not more in the French market, they're still on linear TV.
All right, guys. That's enough of these ladies. We're going to skip into something else. And just give me one quick second. We'll get us there in a jiffy. Patty, what's up? How are you?
Bonjour à tous.
Hello, everyone.
Welcome, everyone. Good morning. My name is Christine Beauchamp, and I will be your moderator for the duration of the National Summit on Combating Auto Theft. Je suis particulièrement heureuse de vous voir tous ici aujourd'hui.
I'm very, very pleased to see all of you here today to talk about this very important issue.
Before we begin, I would like to take a
Mark,
moment to
what's up?
acknowledge that I, along with all of you here in this room, are located on the unceded, unsurrendered territory of the Anishinaabe Algonquin Territory and Nation. I recognize the Algonquins as the customary keepers and defenders of the Kichisibi, known as the Ottawa River watershed tributaries. I honor their long history of welcoming other nations to this beautiful territory and uphold and uplift the voice and values of our host nation. I hope that their tradition of openness and sharing can be served as examples for all of us today in our discussions. Since we also have colleagues that are joining us today virtually, I would invite them to also take a moment to reflect on the territory that they are currently located on.
For today's meeting, please note that we have simultaneous interpretation, which is available for you. The headsets are available in front of the window if you haven't yet taken one. Now, of course, you are asked to speak in the language of your choice. You'll see that we have members of the media with us this morning. They're welcome to listen to the opening statements, and then, of course, they'll be able to follow the rest of the meeting virtually.
Bunga, how are you?
Only those people around the table will have the opportunity to speak. Public Safety Canada is asking you to send your questions and comments to CPPs, to the email address that you received your invitation through.
Let's get started. I have the pleasure of introducing the Prime Minister of Canada, the Right Honourable Justin Trudeau, to deliver the opening remarks.
Merci, Christine. Good morning,
thank you,
everyone.
Christine.
On a tout un groupe ici aujourd'hui.
Well, there's a huge group of people here today. Ministers Leblanc, Virani, Rodriguez, Champagne, Annan, MPs of the areas affected, provincial partners as well, the Solicitor General of Ontario, the Minister of Public Security of Quebec, mayors, mayoresses, police chiefs, industry leaders. Thank you to all of you for being here today for the summit.
We've all come together today to take a serious look at how we're going to crack down on auto theft in Canada. The rise over the last years has been alarming.
What's up?
Organized crime is becoming more brazen, and the international black market for the stolen cars is expanding. The stories we hear are troubling. Len from Toronto had his stolen car located in Ghana. A vehicle from Milton was discovered on sale online in Nigeria. One family from the GTA had their SUV stolen 3 separate times. These cars are stolen from driveways at home, from parking lots at work, and sometimes while people are just out running errands. It's a violation. Acheter une voiture, c'est un gros
Buying a
investissement.
car is a big investment. People need their cars to go to work, to take their kids to school, to do their groceries and go to the doctors as well.
Convening this summit because Canadians need serious action. A catchy slogan won't stop auto theft. A 2-minute YouTube video won't disrupt organized crime. Cracking down on auto theft means bringing law enforcement, border services,
Hey, Randy, what's
port
up? How are you?
authorities, car makers, and insurance companies together. Now, first things first, we need to stop these criminals who are part of gangs and organized crime. As you know, Ontario is one of the hotspots for auto theft. So last week, we announced $121 million to support law enforcement in the province. We're also looking at further strengthening penalties for anyone who participates in auto theft.
We're also working for the various police authorities to be able to cooperate more effectively, be it local police forces, regional, provincial, rail or international police forces. Border services are all following up on information provided by the police. So with more information for them, we'll be able to intercept more stolen cars. The more we work together, the more we'll be able to put a brake on illegal sales.
Previous government Funding for border security was gutted. The long tail of cuts like this have hurt the ability of border agents to do their jobs. We've been reinvesting in the Canada Border Services Agency, not just to make up for those cuts, but also to make sure that they have the support they need to keep up with the evolving ways lawbreakers try to get away with their crimes. We all want to make sure our enforcement agencies have all the tools necessary to prevent auto theft and to get your stolen car back. Yesterday, we announced new funding to make sure the Canada Border Service Agency, RCMP, and the Public Safety Ministry are equipped with enhanced investigative tools and can better detect illegal shipments at ports and recover more stolen vehicles. Of course, one of the best things we can do to prevent auto theft is prevent those thefts from happening in the first place. The fact is, it's become too easy for criminals to get sophisticated electronic devices that make it simple, for example, to copy car key fobs. C'est inacceptable.
Completely outrageous that it's possible to buy tools to help people steal cars on major platforms. Minister Champagne is taking steps to ban this. It's important that the private sector also be part of the solution by innovating and improving the design of cars to prevent theft. Canadians and buying new cars must be able to do that in total confidence. Insurance companies who are here today also know just to what extent this is a serious issue. There are far too many claims. We have to make sure that the purchase of a car and insurance is sustainable for everyone.
Going up because of thefts, we want to look at ways to bring down the cost of insurance, to reduce rates for owners, which could include offering incentives to car owners who invest in powerful anti-theft devices. Bottom line is we all need to be creative to stop these crimes from happening. There's an awful lot to talk about today, and seeing people from so many different sectors come together to address this growing problem is going to be reassuring for Canadians. But the big part of it is when we actually deliver on things that are going to prevent people's cars from being stolen and quickly get them back if ever they are. I know there's a lot of work to do today, and I know there's a lot of great people around the table right now who are leaning in on this. So we have to, because Canadians are expecting it of us. We're going to work together and with international law enforcement agencies like Interpol to get to the bottom of this so we can keep Canadians and their cars safe. Merci beaucoup tout le monde. Thank you for being here. I'm going to pass it over to others now, but I really appreciate having the opportunity to see you all, and thank you directly.
How are you doing?
For being here, for your
TRUDEAU.
leadership in your respective fields, and for the fact that we can now reassure Canadians that more is going to be done, and we are going to keep them and their property safe. Merci tout le monde.
Thank you all.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur le Premier ministre.
What's up with the hugs?
Et maintenant, je vais donner la parole à 5.
And I will give the floor to 5 federal ministers, starting with Minister of Public Safety, Mr. Dominique Leblanc.
Schedule, so each minister will have only 2 minutes to speak. I have here this very handy little red card that I will wave when there's 15 seconds left. Allez-y, Monsieur le Ministre.
Merci beaucoup. Well, you should have been sitting in front of the politicians if you want to cut them off, not to the side. Good morning, tout le monde. Merci beaucoup d'être là.
Thank you all for being here.
Get ready for some lies.
On combating auto theft. As the Prime Minister said, I'm very pleased to be joined this morning by my cabinet colleagues, but also senior officials of my department, of the Public Safety Department, and of course the Commissioner of the RCMP, Mike Duhem, and the President of the Canadian Border Services Agency, Ehren O'Gorman. Thank you very much for joining us. As all of you know, auto theft is something that we have discussed, many of us, over the last number of weeks and months, and something that my caucus colleagues and other parliamentarians have spoken to many of us about as well. Suite à l'annonce de ce sommet, nous n'avons pas été surpris.
After the announcement of this summit, we were surprised to see how much interest it gathered throughout the country. This shows the relevance of our forum, an opportunity for all to meet, discuss, but mostly to identify concrete solutions, because it's only by working together that we will be able to find results.
Part of an announcement that I made last week with my friend, the Solicitor General of Ontario, Michael Kerzner, and Premier Ford and Ontario police leaders. We announced that Ontario will get $121 million in federal funding to support crime prevention and enforcement efforts, including, obviously, auto theft. This funding builds on many of the joint initiatives that are already underway and which are leading to results in communities across the country. The government wants to take immediate action with partners from across the country, and for us to have, d'avoir nos homologues, mon homologue du Québec.
Having our counterparts, Mr. Bonardel from Quebec, police chief from the province of Quebec, from Ontario, also is a very important opportunity for us to find concrete solutions. And I thank you once again for being there, municipal officials and people who will bring solutions forth. And I can't wait to be working with you in the coming weeks.
Minister Virani.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Dominic, for passing the baton and for hosting us. Thank you to everyone who's in the room today and who's been speaking to us about the job of tackling auto theft in Canada. We're here today to literally roll up our sleeves and get to work. And I think Canadians, it goes without saying, are expecting action from us. I know they're feeling insecure in their communities. I'm not just a minister. I'm also a Toronto member of Parliament who lives close to the highways that are being used for the trafficking of these vehicles. And my message to my constituents and to Canadians that are watching is that we are listening, and together with all of the important leaders in this room, we are ready to act. You have heard what we are doing to help law enforcement. Dominic and the Prime Minister covered this. Important investments to tackle the surge in auto thefts and carjackings. Cela signifie également examiner nos lois.
It also means that we have to look at the legislation, the criminal code, to find improvements that would be targeted, efficient, intelligent, that will not cause more problems than they will resolve. That involves focusing on links with organized crimes and people in charge of those auto thefts. The criminal code also has robust measures to deal with those crimes, whether it's stealing an electronic key or selling the vehicle, and also the proceeds of crime from stolen vehicles.
Canadians need to understand we raised the maximum penalty for summary motor vehicle theft convictions in 2019 from 18 months to 2 years less a day. And vehicle theft, when it proceeds by indictment, can lead to a penalty of 10 years imprisonment. The mandatory minimum for an offense is 6 months in the case of a third or subsequent offense. And vehicle theft done in connection with organized crime is already an aggravating factor. That being said, there's a lot of work to be done, and I think the most important message that I can give to you is that the criminal code is my responsibility as the Minister of Justice, and I'm very keen to hear your ideas and suggestions for how we can improve that important statute in terms of keeping Canadians safe from the crisis of car theft that we are seeing. Merci beaucoup.
Merci.
Thank you.
Ministre Rodriguez.
Good morning, Minister Rodriguez. Driving your car means going to work, running errands, taking the kids to soccer. That's the way that life is simplified. And sometimes it's the only way to move around. Getting your car stolen, it's hard financially, but emotionally. And too many Canadians have paid this price.
We have to come together. It's our job collectively to do it. Et les casse-têtes pour organiser les déplacements.
And all the puzzles to move around, the insurance premiums, it's very worrisome. We're all human. It's a big concern. It's time to stop it now.
Of someone's life. And to organize crime, we say time's up. Time's up. On veut que chacun joue notre rôle pour contrer le vol.
We all have to play a role to counter theft, and that's why we're here today to work together.
To prevent car theft, and we'll do more together. Some people would have Canadians believe that there can be one simple, single, easy solution that's going to magically solve the problem. Personally, I've never seen a unicorn. We need solutions, not slogans. Et on le sait, une grande partie des véhicules...
A great part of stolen vehicles are sold to foreign countries.
And with public, we're going to review port security plans and implement robust measures to deny access to organized crime. Il faut chercher des solutions partout est-ce que nous...
We have to find solutions everywhere. A rail company. Are there new technologies to make life more difficult for thieves?
Motor vehicle safety and standards to reflect that. We'll also speak to my provincial and territorial counterparts about their jurisdiction on the aftermarket anti-theft devices. We need to think and talk about how we do that with car manufacturers, with insurers. We need to hear from you, from all of you. And today, you'll hear about the government's plan,
Randy.
some of the things that we want to do. We need to hear what you guys want to do also. Technological change also means we can gather more data now than before along our supply chain. How can we use that data to make sure our trade corridors work well for legitimate trade, but also how can it work better to prevent criminal activity? Alors, on doit se poser toutes ces questions-là aujourd'hui, on doit se mettre...
So all those questions are on the table. We have to focus on the answers and quickly. Thank you.
Minister Anand.
Oh, no.
Merci, Madame la Présidente.
Anita Anand.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Brutal.
Madam Mayor,
Oh,
Mr. Mayors, dear parliamentary
much
colleagues,
better.
members of the police forces, people from the industry, and Minister Leblanc, thank you for having us. It's one of the great summits. Congratulations. The fact that we're together is a great moment. The message is simple for those who are watching us. We're cracking down on criminals. That's what we're doing.
I would say this is the A-team to tackle that collectively and making sure that the key stakeholders, each in our respective jurisdiction, we will take action to take this problem from as many angles as possible. I think everyone understands it's a complex problem and we all have a role to play in fixing it. C'est pour ça que, pour maîtriser la situation...
That's why, to master the situation, we have to cooperate. And this morning is a great moment of cooperation through the country with a myriad of players, governments at all levels, but also people from the industry who have a role to play. Today's goal is simple for those who are with us. It's finding solutions to crush the auto theft problem. We will have to be innovative. For example, there are partners like Innovative Solution Canada that will try to accelerate the development of solutions to better prevent car theft.
Innovators will ultimately lead the way. So I'm excited to see what kind of solutions will be developed by them. On prevention, criminals are using tools like uncertified, and let me quote, immobilizer reprogrammers and GPS jammers to steal cars. The famous flipper, those who have been on the internet would know what I mean. We have already taken action to remove uncertified and illegal product from the market. We have targeted 22 product brands and engaged 13 distributors, resulting already in the removal of more than 300 products offering and listing from the Canadian distribution chain. But we need, and we are going to be doing more. Par contre, comme vous imaginez, la technologie...
As you can imagine, technology keeps evolving and creates products that are even more sophisticated and that facilitate car theft. And many Canadians, like Minister Leblanc said and the Prime Minister said, are worried that such devices are circulating even today, being used to detect their fob key detected.
This morning, we're going to ban the importation, sale, and use of consumer hacking devices like the famous flippers used to commit these crimes. So I hope that everyone watching is on notice. Le vol d'automobile est un problème auquel le gouvernement ne...
Car theft is a problem that we cannot attack by ourselves at the government. We all have a role to play in this initiative. This is why I can't wait to hear my various colleagues here, the people here today, all have solutions, and we will keep working together to protect Canadians and stop this growing issue. So welcome here to Ottawa.
Cede the floor to my colleague, Minister Anand. Merci.
Mr. Anand. Bonjour tout le monde, merci, chers collègues.
Good morning, all. Thank you, dear colleagues, and everybody in the room today for being here with us this morning for this very, very important conversation.
Positive vibe in the room this morning and in the foyer as we were coming up. And many, many people came to me and said, this is an excellent idea to combat a serious problem in our country. And the issue is serious, and public policy demands serious conversation and collective collaboration towards a solution, and that's what we are here to do today together. We know that the economic burdens of auto theft in aggregate amount to over $1 billion when you look at the insurance, the health care, and the criminal justice system costs. And this economic burden is augmented by the tangible and visceral effects on Canadians individually and as families when vehicles are stolen off of driveways, as has happened in my neighborhood of Oakville so many times. I've had conversations with local law enforcement and municipal leaders, and I thank you all for being here today, including Chief Tanner, Mayor Burton, and Councillor Knoll, who I think is on the line, who chairs the Police Services Board. It's collective action that is going to be necessary to address this problem going forward, and that's why we have gathered all of us here today to have this important conversation. I will say that la lutte contre le vol d'automobile, c'est une...
That car theft is a shared responsibility, and it's essential to have our conversation this morning.
Public policy results from collaboration, and that's exactly what we will do today. Donc avec ça, merci beaucoup. J'apprécie.
So on that, thank you so very much, and I appreciate that you're here today.
Thank you, ministers. We will now take a moment for the media to vacate the room. We will now move on to our first agenda item of the day, a regional perspective on auto theft in Canada. We will hear from provincial ministers and mayors. And once all the speakers have done their presentations, we will have a brief Q&A if time permits. In order to have time for questions, each presenter will have 3 minutes, and I will raise the red card when you have 30 seconds left. Let me introduce our first speaker for this event, the Solicitor General for Ontario, the Honourable Michael Kurtzner,
Nova Scotia here.
to start off this session with an overview of auto theft in Ontario.
Hi, Ronald.
Thank you. It's an honor to be here, and I want to acknowledge and thank the Prime Minister for attending this morning. Thank you, Dominic, and your cabinet colleagues. C'est un plaisir d'être ici aujourd'hui. Je prends la sécurité publique très...
I'm happy to be here today. Public safety is a very serious concern. We are concerned by the increase in car thefts.
In the Government of Ontario, we've set a tone and an expectation and a standard. And we say this proudly, that we all have a right to live safely in our communities, to wake our kids up in the morning and see them off to school, to go to work and to come home and to be with our family safely. This is our inherent right. Even yesterday, I received a call from a constituent who was held at gunpoint down the street from where I live so the thieves could steal his car. And this is totally unacceptable. And that's why Ontario has stepped it up with an investment of over $160 million, $112 million through the bail, complying and warrant apprehension grant, $51 million through the auto theft grant. And we're putting more boots on the ground by expanding the Ontario Police College. And we're going to put about 600 more people or 800 more people, please God, on the ground by expanding the size of the cohorts that we have. And we know that this is an important step. And what we need the federal government to do, and I appreciate your announcement very much yesterday, Dominic, is to continue to provide the resources and the instructions so that CBSA can inspect the outgoing cargo. It seems so obvious, but it's something that has to take place. Just as we have great concern and we appreciate the intensity of CBSA looking at incoming cargo, they have to treat the same level of concern with outgoing cargo. And the second thing that I appreciate our discussions with my colleague and friend Minister Virani is reviewing the criminal code to be tougher on those people who think it's okay to steal a car. We want to stop the revolving door of people coming back out on our streets and doing it again. We want to have them locked up. We want to have them in jail. So I know our government of Ontario will continue to work very collaboratively and cooperatively with yourselves at the federal government level, with our provincial counterparts. And I want to acknowledge the tremendous meetings I've had in the last couple of days with Francois and Simone in Quebec City that share the same concern at the Port of Montreal. It's not only the Port of Montreal, it's the other ports in Canada, and it's the rail yards. And we want to send one specific message today to those people who feel it's okay to steal a car. We will lock you up. And when we set the tone, and when we set the expectation, and when we set the standard of our rights to live safely in our communities, we will have those safe communities. Pour le Premier ministre de l'Ontario et pour moi, c'est personnel.
For the Premier of Ontario and myself, it's personal. Everyone has the right to feel safe in their home and in their community.
In our own homes and communities. Merci beaucoup. Thank you.
Thank you, Minister.
Welcome to all the
Je
new
vais passer la
members.
parole maintenant
I need to be
ministre de la
reminded of
Sécurité.
such things.
Now,
Thank you
Public
so much to
Safety
Dr. Canada for
Minister
hooking
of
us up. It's amazing.
François Bonnarel.
Hi, Thaco, what's up?
Thank you very much. With me, Ms. Beausoleil from Sûreté Québec. Mr. Brochet, thank you very much for being here. They're also from the automobile sector. Dominique, firstly, I'd like to thank you. Thank you for having organized this summit. This was a quick and positive response that Michael and I raised last October. This is an important issue, and those here today show that this is very serious. Our realities are similar, and we are pleased that this question is a pan-Canadian dialogue. We will fight against auto theft, and we want to make sure that we can keep our citizens safe. We know that auto theft is more and more violent, and it can be very perturbing for those people who are victims. Today in the papers, the PVM officer almost lost his life because of a robber. In Quebec, the police services say that the offense rate for auto theft has seen a rise to the tune of 50% between 2021 and 2022. This is 20,000 thefts in Quebec, and this increase is continuing. Sûreté Québec and services, police services, are already working to fight this. The police in Ontario and the RCMP and the CBSA is also all working. This has shown the results. This has been done in collaboration with the police partners with their training and prevention services. The government of Quebec is concerned with this, and it has been working with its counterparts to better understand the phenomenon and to think together at how to better implement solutions. It is imperative that we work together and that we work on the field. Therefore, I am very pleased to see that Sûreté Québec has met the needs and is already working to intensify its actions to deal with this issue. Ever since February 5th, many resources have been added in inquiries and in organized crime fighting to fight this scourge. There are 10 municipal police services working on it as well. And so we will deploy all efforts, and I encourage them to continue to share information amongst themselves and with other people like insurers and manufacturers. Other considerations can be taken into account to improve the situation. For example, a more presence of CBSA agents when looking at all goods leaving the Port of Montreal. And there was a $26 million announcement that was made, and thank you for that. Thank you for that work. Intensifying the RCMP efforts to deal with transnational actions and to protect cars against other means. And Quebec will be open to work with the federal government and with provincial governments to look at possible modifications to the criminal code, to look at the possibilities to strengthen legislative measures. Quebec will look at the legislative framework to look at the supplementary measures that is part of its jurisdiction. In conclusion, know that Quebec is looking at strengthening a federal strategy to fight against auto theft, and will share information with the other counterparts. I am confident that the police services will be able to deal with this issue. Thank you very much. Thank you, Minister. Now, the Mayor of Montreal, Ms. Valérie Plante. Thank you very much. First off, I'm very pleased to be here. Thank you very much, Dominique, for having invited me. Thank you to my colleagues. Thank you to the Canadian government for having organized this summit. I know that Dominique and Francois, Mr. Bonardel and Mr. Minister, we were together in Montreal in November, and we said to ourselves that we need to find solutions. And therefore, I'm very pleased that we are able to come together, bring all partners together here so that we can look at sustainable solutions. Many things have been said, so I'm not going to repeat everything. The reason why I'm here today, we said that is because this is a scourge. First off, this is something that was mentioned by my colleagues on the other side of the table. This is a stress that people experience, especially when they lose their car. When you wake up in the morning, you have to bring the children to school, and you have no car. You know, in Montreal, there's been a huge team that has been working on this. And I can just imagine that it's not the case for everyone. We need to find solutions so that we can help people's lives and improve their situation. Mr. Bonardel said that our police services are more at risk, and we need to avoid that. Another reason why I'm here.
Hey, Rocco's, what's up?
And that's exactly the theme that I wanted to keep in mind. It's about youth who are found in auto theft, in this industry and in this issue. At the City of Montreal in 2021, we developed an approach for urban security that is very much based on how to decrease the number of armed violence incidences with youth. When we look at what has happened in Montreal in the past year, over the 550 arrests that were made for auto theft, 50% of them were with those between 12 and 24 years old. For youth, this may be an easy way to get money and also to get illegal weapons. And that's, of course, those people who know me, this is a cause that is dear to me, illegal weapon trafficking. So we have a huge responsibility. And I think we are the right people to deal with this. And as Montreal has a port, and I'd like to also thank Ms. Deschamps for being here, well, of course, we have a responsibility that's even larger. There's a big presence of the province of Quebec, so we are well positioned to work with our police services. The political desire is well represented today with the other mayors here, Mr. Aboyo, who's going to be speaking after me. I would like to invite ourselves not only to find solutions for today, but something that we all know is that organized crime is always a step ahead. They're always planning what will be implemented. So I'd like to thank the announcements that were made this morning about the certain tools that have been used, but we need to think now about what will be the next step. What will they do to adapt to themselves in auto theft? Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
Thank you. First of all, I just want to acknowledge the significance of the summit. Thank you, Dominic, for calling the summit. You know, I had met with previous public safety ministers, and really the response was this is a provincial or a local issue. Having the summit, getting everyone together is a clear signal that you want to have a partnership with the federal government, and I take that as a very encouraging
I like all those channels
sign,
too.
so thank you.
They all work
in
really
terms of the
hard.
crisis
Northern
of what we're seeing in
Perspective is one of
Peel,
my favorites. I like
420
Clyde.
million last year in
Moose
stolen
on the
vehicles.
Loose is good.
This is huge industry. This is huge dollars for organized crime. It is the third largest source for organized crime in our region, only trailing guns and drugs. And sadly, it's not getting better. Year after year, the numbers are going up. And that's the case in 2024 right now. It continues to skyrocket. So for all the maneuvers that are happening, all the announcements, it's not stopping this scary, ugly trend. And it's becoming more brazen. Before, it was simply replicating these keys and quietly in the middle of the night, stealing the cars. You've got folks knocking down doors now. And we're seeing the videos that are being shared on WhatsApp groups and the internet, and it is harrowing. Violent carjackings now. That's the value of this property. And it is terrifying our residents. We're doing everything we can locally. 2 years ago, we had the largest police budget increase in our history. This year, we had an even more significant increase. At a time when you see budget increases of 1 or 2%, our police budget increase was 14%. We've doubled the size of the auto theft unit. Our city even funded a pilot program to hand out Faraday pouches to residents. We're trying to do everything we can, but really what we need is help on a federal level. And I think the announcements speak to the direction you're going. I just wanted to highlight the screening is so important. We have the largest intermodal hub in Brampton with CN. Literally, people will knock on the doors at CN and say, I can see my car. The police don't have jurisdiction. Our local police don't have jurisdiction. They have to get a warrant. By the time they get a warrant, it's gone. They need the help of CBSA. I love to see, you talk about these screening devices. I think they're about $3 million. I'd love to see one at the intermodal hub so you can actually stop. You can see the stolen vehicles before it gets to the port. We're seeing about 80% of our stolen vehicles go to the port. That's why it's such a powerful revenue source. On sentencing, like the mayor of Montreal mentioned, we're seeing a high number of young offenders. You see organized crime preying upon young people. They'll pay them $2,000 to steal the car. If they get caught, they'll pay them another $10,000 if they spend one night in jail. And so I think given the nature of their age, they're using these individuals. And sometimes the kids don't even know each other. And so I'm optimistic that today marks the start of solutions. I am worried when I hear about it maybe being spread out over 3 years because we need this help now. Organized crime is so emboldened right now by how profitable this is. When I go back to 420 million in Peel, that's funding guns and drugs. The difference is with guns and drugs, you're going to spend a significant time behind bars. We're not seeing that with auto thefts. Very encouraging that there are significant sentences, but I know when I speak to our local crowns, quite often it's one night. If they get caught, it's one night. And so I'm not sure how you change that, but we're very much eager in Peel to have your support in addressing this. And really, I say if there's a leak in a bucket and water is pouring out, it's the fact that the stolen vehicle gets out of Canada so easily. And if we can stop that, I think it'll help unravel everything. But honored to be here and really encouraged that you've taken leadership in actually getting us all together.
Thank you, Mayor Brown. Et maintenant, nous avons le maire de Laval, Monsieur Stéphane Boyer.
Mayor of Laval, Mr. Stéphane Boyer. Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here today with you today. Obviously, I'm not an expert in this field, but I'm here to share my experience as a mayor. So as a first year, this first year marked me for my life because of the violence that occurred on our territory. In 2021, there wasn't even one day that went by where there wasn't a shooting. During the election, there was a young person who was killed in a municipal library. One day, I was at the FCM in 2022 with other mayors in Canada to talk about public safety. And at that very moment, when we were there with my colleagues, I was there with Mr. Leblanc, somebody in a restaurant shot a client in the head, and it was a mafia that was dealing with issues in front of other families who were there at their table eating sushi. We had a cégep, one of the largest cégeps in Quebec. There was a drug transaction that went wrong. There were 4 people that were hurt, and then 500 were confined to the building, and people were scared. Recently, there was a huge wave of extortion with certain restaurants. Some restaurants that were burnt down 6 times over. Sometimes they were asked to be paid for their safety. Otherwise, they were going to lose their business. They attacked their homes. They took their cars. Why am I talking to you about this today? Well, because everything is interrelated. The link between these events is organized crime, gangs, mafia. This is organized crime. And it exists so that it can make money, so that it can get funding. It can be through drugs, it can be through auto theft, it can be through online fraud, credit card fraud, but they go where the money is found. So it is important that we find solutions to deal with auto theft, but it's also important to look at this in a more holistic fashion.
Hey, Lyndon, what's up?
One thing that marked me as a mayor is that we have resolution rates of crime against people who, which is very high, 80, 85%. Of homicides, thefts, and issues will be dealt with. But when it comes to crime against goods, fraud, theft, auto theft, break-ins, we're at 15 or 20%. So it's very low. Of course, we can talk about putting people behind bars and put them there for longer. But first, we need to figure out how to stop them. I understand our first reflection is that, of course, something like a rape or another robbery is more severe, so we're going to deal with that. But my question is, what are the effects on our society not to be able to act on auto theft or theft of goods? So this is the question that I have, and the question that I wanted to bring to the table today is to look at this in a holistic fashion. I think this is a great initiative that we are here today to deal with auto theft, but we also need to make sure we look at this more holistically. And we look at the resolution of these type of incidences. Thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Boyer.
Ministers and the mayors for your intervention. Unfortunately, we are running out of time for questions, so we will move on to our next segment. And now that we've had a bit of a sense as to what's happening across the country, I'd like to turn the mic over to Terry O'Brien from Equité Canada to walk us through a presentation on the current national auto theft trends and data, including its impact domestically and abroad.
Good morning, everyone. It is both a privilege and an honor to address you today at the National Summit for Combating Auto Theft. As we gather here today, we embark on a critical dialogue about the pressing issue of auto theft and its profound impact on the safety and security of Canadians. My name is Terry O'Brien, and I serve as President and CEO of Equité Association, a not-for-profit organization dedicated to combating insurance crimes. Our team of specialized investigators provide expert support to law enforcement agencies across Canada, collaborating with law enforcement to investigate vehicle theft, including identifying and recovering stolen vehicles. Additionally, Equité Association is Canada's national authority on insurance crime and fraud prevention, and we've developed advanced analytics that allow us to share intelligence and effectively track the evolving trends of insurance crime. My presentation here today lays the groundwork, starting with how auto theft constitutes a national crisis, its impacts on public safety, where Canada fits with the global scale, and what is currently being done to address the issue. Slide, please. Thank you. So every 5 minutes, a vehicle is stolen in Canada, and that means every 5 minutes, a Canadian is victimized, and every 5 minutes, a neighborhood in our country feels less safe. With an annual cost exceeding $1.2 billion to Canadians, auto theft is not just a property crime. Vehicles in Canada are being stolen by domestic and international criminal organizations. The proceeds are being used to finance domestic drug trafficking, arms dealing, human trafficking, and international terrorism. These crimes hurt our communities and puts Canada in the spotlight internationally as a source nation for illegal trade. Addressing the issue is an important step in keeping Canadians safe and stemming the flow of funds into organized crime. Slide, please. Thank you. Could we go back one? Slide 3, thanks. So the causes behind Canada's auto theft problem are multifaceted. Canada's current motor vehicle regulations were fully implemented in 2007, which resulted in a steady decline in auto theft. Since then, innovations in keyless and remote start technologies have been introduced in vehicles, and criminals are now taking advantage of these outdated standards. They're able to quickly and easily exploit these vulnerabilities, gaining access to a locked vehicle in under 60 seconds. At Equite, we started to track this significant increase in auto theft as a result of the pandemic, which has continued to gain momentum. Slide, please. Thanks. Since 2021, after the anomaly of the pandemic and the supply chain issues, auto theft has risen 34% nationally. In 2023, we know that over 105,000 motor vehicles were stolen in Canada, with Ontario and Quebec trending higher than the rest of the country. In 3 short years,
Brenda,
Ontario's witnessed 53% increase in auto theft, while Quebec residents have been hit even harder, experiencing a staggering 66% increase. This is further exacerbated by the declining recovery rates, which suggest vehicles are primarily being exported overseas through the ports or revinned and sold domestically to unsuspecting Canadians. Defrauding Canadians through our insurance industry of $1.2 billion annually is nearly doubled by the illegal vehicle sales, thereby putting billions of dollars into the hands of organized crime. Slide, please. Today, we will work together to confront the vulnerabilities within our ecosystem. Lack of information sharing, loopholes in our shipping declaration systems, and outdated anti-theft safety standards have paved the way for this growing criminal networks and crime rings that are expanding their operations across Canada. We know that criminals are becoming more brazen, often resorting to physical violence, as evidenced in the significant increase in carjackings, break-and-enters, and owner-interrupted thefts that often result in violence. GTA residents have witnessed a 104% increase in carjackings. And not all vehicles are destined for export. Domestically, there's also been a sharp increase in stolen vehicles being revinned across the country. Revinning is when the vehicle identification number, or the VIN, is changed in essence to create a false identity for the vehicle, masking the fact that it has been stolen. By creating a new identity for these vehicles, criminals can either sell them to unsuspecting Canadians, use them to commit other crimes domestically, or export them for significant profit. So whether a vehicle has been revinned or exported overseas, the profit margins are very high and only serve to fund more criminal activity in our communities. And in this way, Canadians are being exploited twice. Once when they are victimized by auto theft, and again as the proceeds of crime are being funneled back into our communities, funding guns, drugs, and other illegal activities. Slide, please. Canada's auto theft crisis is not staying within our borders. Interpol has identified Canada as a source nation for stolen vehicles. According to Interpol, stolen Canadian vehicles are being used to commit crimes such as transporting criminals, supporting terrorism, and trafficking of guns, drugs, and people. Interpol has designated Equite Association as the non-law enforcement repatriation agency for all Canadian stolen vehicles. With this designation, we participate in international investigations and intelligence sharing with global law enforcement agencies. This allows us to identify more Canadian stolen vehicles overseas and repatriate them to their rightful owner and disrupt the funding of organized crime through auto theft. We have already participated in several large-scale and successful repatriation efforts. However, repatriations incur significant costs for insurers, which are not fully covered by the vehicle's return. The insurance industry, through Equite, participates in repatriation solely to stop the flow of funds into organized crime. We recognize this problem will not be fixed in isolation or within our borders alone. Together, we are committed to tackling this problem globally to ensure the safety and security of Canadians. Slide, please. Stolen vehicles leaving Canada predominantly find their way into the countries highlighted on this slide. Due to the varying laws and regulations internationally, repatriation is a complex process that requires close collaboration across many stakeholders. Project Malta is a good example of how collaboration led to the successful repatriation of over 45 stolen vehicles back to Canada and the resulting disruption of funding to those criminal organizations. Led by Equité investigators in coordination with the CBSA, the RCMP, member insurers, and the Maltese authorities, these vehicles were returned to Canada. However, repatriations are complex and expensive to execute, which underscores the importance of prevention, which we will discuss today at this summit. Malta is also one of the common recovery ports of our Canadian stolen vehicles, as it is a gateway to Europe, Africa, and the Middle East. As you can see, the ports with shipping routes across the Atlantic are exploited the most due to their gateway into these trade markets for stolen vehicles. And Canada currently has thousands of stolen vehicles in these countries. Slide, please. So earlier I touched upon how auto theft affects the safety and security of Canadians, and I wanted to take a minute to illustrate the significant impact auto theft has on our everyday sense of safety in our communities. Each stolen vehicle is not just a loss of property, it's a fracture in the foundation of our peace of mind, causing trauma to our families. We did have a short news video to share, but unfortunately the video isn't working for us this morning. But in the video, a father puts his baby's car seat in the car and then returns to pick up his toddler from the porch when the car thieves attempt to steal the car out of his vehicle with the baby in the back seat. And while it was extremely traumatic for this father, luckily nobody was hurt. This was an occurrence in April 2022 in Brampton, Ontario. But it has become an all too common occurrence of owner-interrupted thefts that have increased at an alarming rate since April of 2022. And every parent of small children has put one child in the car and then turned around to pick up their other child off the porch. And nobody should feel this unsafe in their driveway, taking care of their families. From a fiscal standpoint, of course, there are significant costs incurred by the government through law enforcement and the administration of the criminal justice system, which affects all taxpayers, not just drivers. Insurance crime, often auto theft, including auto theft, often targets the most marginalized in our society, including areas like Brampton, Ontario. And both individuals and insurers bear extraordinary costs in premiums, deductibles, rental cars, transportation costs, lost days at work, all at a time when the cost of living and inflation is already challenging many Canadians. Slide, please. Thank you. So it's stories and experiences like this one which leave Canadians feeling vulnerable in their homes and in their communities. According to a recent Angus Reid survey, the continued rise in auto theft is having a significant impact on Canadians' sense of safety. 84% of Canadians say the rise in auto theft makes them increasingly concerned about the crime in their community, and 69% say the rise in auto theft makes them concerned about their personal safety and the safety of their families. Canadians are feeling the real ramifications and consequences of auto theft. Slide, please. So we've seen the trends data, we've heard from Canadians directly. We'd like to shift our focus to the many efforts underway already. Equité has MOUs in place with police services across Canada. We work with partners nationally and internationally on a daily basis to combat auto theft. Our trained investigators work regularly with law enforcement, CBSA, as well as our member companies and their investigative teams, our international counterparts through the RCMP liaison officers, and Interpol, in identifying and recovering stolen vehicles and investigating auto theft crime rings. In collaboration with Interpol and law enforcement, we have highlighted the necessity for CPIC data to be fed into Interpol's database. The addition of Canadian stolen vehicle data will allow international law enforcement to identify stolen vehicles from Canada. Our investigators are specialized in identifying stolen vehicles. They provide evidence as expert witnesses in court, assisting law enforcement when search warrants are executed, and providing industry impact statements about the effects of auto theft on society that Crown prosecutors can use to support strong sentencing. Equite collaborates very closely with our partners in CBSA. We conduct expert examinations at the ports and rail yards to determine if the vehicles are indeed stolen and facilitate their recovery to the rightful owner. These public-private partnerships create a more effective and efficient way of addressing the issue of auto theft by pooling our resources and lending our expertise. Consumer awareness is a key step in preventing auto theft. Prevention awareness diminishes the likelihood of auto theft in the first place. And Canadian insurers are the ones taking those urgent and often traumatized phone calls from consumers looking for assistance at a time when they feel scared and victimized. By working together, collaborative partnerships are truly effective. We can share information and intelligence, identify patterns and trends of criminal activity, but there's more work to be done too. Slide, please. We would like to thank public safety for their leadership in shaping solutions to a complex problem under these 4 pillars. In collaboration with the Insurance Bureau of Canada, my colleague Celeste Power, you will hear from her this morning on potential solutions to this complex problem. Celeste will speak about how the groundwork discussed in today's presentation can be used to address the auto theft crisis through collaborative initiatives by all stakeholders, including government, law enforcement, the insurance industry, and manufacturers. She will further articulate the importance of information sharing. This includes the opportunity to share more intelligence and information with CBSA, on increased prevention and consumer awareness, where we hope to see an increase in disclosure obligations on the shippers as aligned to US guidelines, on intervention through law enforcement and technology standards. In particular, we know the UK has made headway in the area of anti-theft devices in vehicles. And by working together, government regulations can support solutions in the ecosystem. Yesterday's announcement on further investments in CBSA will make our ports safer and harder to exploit through effective recoveries. In closing, today's summit marks a significant step forward in achieving this vision. By harnessing the collective strength in this room, we will truly make headway in protecting honest, hardworking Canadians. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Ms. O'Brien. Our third session will focus on gaps and potential solutions that could be explored along the continuum of auto theft. This will include speakers from industry and law enforcement, recognizing that deterrence methods and solutions must come from many places. Reminder that I do have my red card here, and I will raise it when there's 1 minute left. Each of the presentations are 10 minutes long, and I will ask you to keep your questions for the end. I will now turn it to David Adams from Global Automakers Canada and Brian Kingston from the Canadian Vehicles Manufacturers Association to provide remarks on behalf of their respective organizations.
Bonjour tout le monde, mon nom est David Adams et je suis le président de Constructeurs.
I'm Dave Adams. I'm the owner of Global Automakers Association.
Automakers representing 25 different brands, including Canada's 2 largest vehicle producers, Toyota and Honda. I sincerely appreciate the opportunity to be present here today. In many ways, today's summit can already be characterized as a success, in our view, because it has brought together all of us, from private sector, public sector, that are dealing with the effects of organized crime in Canada, and one of its most visible symptoms, auto theft. This summit is actually something the Global Automakers of Canada has been advocating for almost 2 years. When we think back over the last 2 years and contemplate why auto theft has grown so rapidly over that time, it is clear that auto theft has increasingly become highly lucrative, and for a number of reasons, Canada has been identified by Interpol as a source nation of stolen vehicles. Our fundamental belief, therefore, is that similar to guns and drugs, if we focus on impacting the problem, then we need to address the supply. And I'm sure we will be talking about this and other potential solutions to mitigate auto theft this afternoon and beyond. And I say beyond because as beneficial as today is in bringing us all together, we are only scratching the surface with respect to the collaborative and coordinated effort that needs to be undertaken to address auto theft. I don't even know who told on me. That is why we believe that a federal national auto theft office needs to be established within public safety that would serve 2 purposes, both being a depository and distributor of key information related to vehicular theft in order to have that information exchange between law enforcement, government, automakers, insurers, etc., take place in an almost real-time way. Because we all know that being able to act with alacrity is key to both
Thanks again,
vehicle
Dive Crew.
recovery
Have a good one.
and perpetrator arrests. Such an office could also assist in dealing with the municipal, provincial, public and private jurisdictional issues that seem to often throw sand in the gears of timely and effective investigation and apprehension. Additionally, we've seen firsthand the impact of the $51 million committed by the Ontario government last year to establishing a provincial auto theft task force with respect to both busts and recoveries, highlighting that resources, while not the only solution, do make a huge difference. We were pleased to see the contribution of $121 million announced by the federal government. Thank you very much. Last week, and also an additional $28 million announced yesterday in this area. But in our regular discussions with law enforcement agencies across the country, these provincial and municipal task forces need to be knit together under the ambit of a national auto theft task force that can promote better information and resource sharing and coordinated approach to the scourge that is auto theft in Canada. I know I'm here, and I believe we're all here for the benefit of Canadians, our constituents and neighbors, our shared customers who are worried about waking up to find their vehicle stolen from their driveway or from the shopping mall parking lot, and who are increasingly worried about their carjackings and home invasions as they proactively work to do their part to safeguard their vehicle to prevent it from being stolen. Collectively, we need smart, coordinated, comprehensive action. Organized crime is highly sophisticated, well-financed, and technologically savvy. We need to work together to ensure we avoid, as best we can, a whack-a-mole situation where we address auto theft in one area only to see it arise in another. Canada's automakers have been closely engaged in this issue for years, and we are happy to have all the partners at the table this morning joining us in this fight against organized crime. For our part, we're doing the following. Automakers are consistently reviewing and updating the security systems in our vehicles to keep them safe for customers. We've not been sitting on our hands, but are facing increasing odds against sophisticated international organized crime rings who have identified Canada as an opportune market for crimes. Vehicles with similar security systems in other countries are not seeing the same kind of challenge with auto theft. We've been convening weekly meetings of participating member companies focused on the issue of mitigating auto theft. We've been convening monthly meetings with other key industry associations to share intelligence, map out advocacy initiatives on auto theft with federal, provincial, and municipal officials. We've also been convening monthly meetings with police authorities and auto theft task forces from across the country to share intelligence, determine how we can better knit together law enforcement with auto manufacturers to assist in interdicting vehicles immediately after they've been reported stolen. We've been meeting with federal and provincial government officials across the country to raise the issue of auto theft. We are developing a soon-to-be-released website that will focus on providing awareness on auto theft to consumers, serving as a focal point for more information on auto theft prevention and informational assistance to those that have had their vehicles stolen. Our law enforcement officials always have great names for their task forces. Our website will be called heat.tools, and HEAT stands for Helping Eliminate Auto Theft. Look for that soon. We've been meeting with Amazon and other online platforms to discuss the reality that tools and devices with no other legitimate purpose than to facilitate auto theft are readily available on their platforms. And in that vein, researching legislation currently being proposed in the UK, where such devices are being sold. Minister Champagne, thank you very much for your comments this morning. It sounds like that's an initiative coming out of the summit to do likewise here in Canada. Appreciate that. We've been meeting with the Canadian Council of Motor Transport Administrators to raise the issue of auto theft to their board. And we've been encouraging all of our members to meet with police teams when vehicles are recovered to better understand how thieves have compromised the vehicle to steal it so that information can be supplied to global engineering teams. We don't know all the answers by any means, and auto theft is a very complex problem for which there are no quick fixes or silver bullets. However, we do believe that there are some short, medium, and longer-term initiatives that could be undertaken to address the auto theft problem plaguing our country right now. We look forward to working with all of you to identify and implement these solutions. And thanks very much for your time and for having me here today.
Good morning. On behalf of the Canadian Vehicle Manufacturers Association representing Ford, General Motors, and Stellantis, I greatly appreciate the opportunity to provide our views on what needs to be done to combat auto theft. Now, before I get started, I don't feel right about being allotted more time than the honorable ministers, so let me get right to the point. Finding solutions to the theft crisis depends on correctly diagnosing the source of the problem. Vehicle theft rates have grown much faster in Canada than the United States since 2021. This is despite stronger regulatory requirements for Canadian vehicles in the form of the mandatory engine immobilizer, as well as the fitment of the exact same technologies in new vehicles in both countries. So what explains that divergence in theft rates if we have more secure vehicles by default? The answer is concerning. Sophisticated transnational organized crime groups have targeted Canada because the risk of prosecution is low and the financial reward is high. So to successfully combat vehicle theft, we have to target organized crime groups and close our ports to stolen vehicle exports. Yesterday, the CVMA, along with the Canadian Automobile Dealers Association and the Canadian Finance and Lease Association, released a checklist that outlines key components of such a plan. We applaud the efforts of the province of Ontario to establish a stolen vehicle task force, law enforcement leadership to raise awareness of the issue and engage with manufacturers, and the recently announced federal funding to crack down on theft in Ontario. But further action is required, including the following. We need more funding for law enforcement. The funding provided to Ontario should be replicated across Canada as required. A dedicated auto theft reporting mechanism for the public could also facilitate coordinated and expedited enforcement action. Secondly, criminal code changes. The potential profits generated through auto theft continue to outweigh the risk of capture, prosecution, and sentencing for organized crime in this country. The criminal code needs to be strengthened so that there are real consequences for vehicle thieves. Thirdly, we need additional resources for CBSA. And first, Minister LeBlanc, thank you for the announcement yesterday. That is absolutely welcome and a step in the right direction. Investments into personnel, container imaging, VIN verification, all these sorts of initiatives will make a difference and stem the flow. And fourth, we need policy coordination. Auto manufacturers are constantly increasing vehicle security systems and being asked to do more. At the same time, we're being exposed to right to repair legislation that provides and pushes for full access to data stored and transmitted by vehicles beyond what is needed for repair. So this works directly against the efforts of auto manufacturers to keep vehicle systems secure. And finally, no solution is complete, of course, without ongoing collaboration between manufacturers and law enforcement agency. CVMA members are actively working with law enforcement agencies represented here today to identify theft methods and capture vehicle thieves. So this is critical, and we are committed to that continued engagement. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Adams and Mr. Kingston. Now let's turn it over to Celeste Power from the Insurance Bureau of Canada for her presentation.
Thank you very much. And thank you, ministers, and of course to the Prime Minister for being here today, convening this session, and for your attention on auto theft. Bon matin tout le monde. Good morning, everyone. I also want to thank all the provincial representatives, law enforcement officials, and insurance and manufacturing executives.
Hello,
It is
Danielle.
critical
How are you?
that we are all here today because in the midst of a national crisis on auto theft, only a whole of society approach can solve the issue. As the Prime Minister said earlier today, we must work together. Our industry often sees trends before they become a crisis by way of rising claims. And when we began sawing rising auto theft rates, as Terry referenced earlier from Equite, our industry's organization that fights insurance crime, we looked quickly at ways that we could reduce the impact on our customers. But it was immediately clear that we could not tackle this issue on our own. The good news is we don't have to. Given the representation in this room, we have all the right people to solve this issue. We're all here today because we want the same thing, for Canadians to feel safe in their communities. Thank you for making this a priority today. I've been asked to speak about the gaps that we're seeing and some high-level solutions that we need to address those gaps. So I'll jump right in. Next slide. And the next slide. I'd like to paint a picture. In terms of solving the auto theft crisis, where do we want to be by 2030? Canada should no longer be seen as a target destination for international organized crime. groups that source their stolen vehicles through Canada. By 2030, it should be so difficult to steal and export a car in Canada that these groups look elsewhere. And by then, other countries are looking at what we've done to solve auto theft in our own borders. Imagining 2030 can be useful because by then, autonomous vehicles are much more likely to be more common, which means the consequences of theft could be much more severe. If a criminal or a terrorist can hack a car and invoke terror with it, we will have failed. We can prevent those outcomes with our collective actions starting today. Next slide, please. So, how do we realize that vision? What gaps or vulnerabilities do we have to close working together? First, we have to ensure vehicle owners are aware of the risk of auto theft and what they can do about it. Second, we have to prevent cars from being stolen in the first place. They are too easy to steal in Canada. The supply to thieves must be addressed. The profits are high and the penalties are light. Third, we need improved ability to intercept vehicles once stolen. This involves closing gaps in law enforcement coordination and sharing of data and intelligence. We all have various pieces of the puzzle. Sharing those pieces will ensure red flags are raised and will help dismantle the networks that benefit from our current silos. This means domestically,
Hi, Angus, what's up?
addressing the vulnerabilities in rebinning a vehicle. It's a provincial responsibility. It's currently too easy for criminals to register a stolen vehicle, exploiting loopholes that were built in for the convenience of honest customers, but are now serving the interest of organized criminals. And our borders are too porous. They're designed to prevent bad things from getting out, which is critically important. But we also need to deter, they're meant to deter things from getting in, but of course we also need to deter things from getting out. This gap involves the port authorities, but it also involves cooperation of shipping and rail companies and freight forwarders. Last night's announcement, Minister, proves that the federal government is listening, and this is a great start to closing that gap. Finally, we need to address the gap on recovery. Organized crime groups will not benefit if Canadians' cars never reach their clients. We have to address gaps in international policing coordination to make it easier to bring Canadian vehicles home. Next slide. To kick off our discussion, I'm focusing on high-level solutions that we can work together to put in place that build on the good work that many of you are already doing. When it comes to elevating awareness, in addition to the consumer education brokers and agents are doing at the point of sale, the P&C insurance industry ran an End Auto Theft campaign to educate drivers on what they could do to protect themselves. We reached tens of millions of drivers, and we're not alone. As noted by Mayor Brown, the City of Brampton did a Faraday bag giveaway that raised so much awareness, other regions followed suit. In Alberta, law enforcement ran Operation Cold Start, aimed at reducing theft by encouraging drivers to not leave idling vehicles unattended. We need more of this. As for prevention, many insurers have encouraged their customers to install an approved aftermarket tracking device, and in many cases, they covered the cost of installing that aftermarket device, provided incentives for people that did so, and sometimes removed the surcharges applied to high-risk vehicles of theft. And we're always looking as an industry for more ways to improve, but we're wary of penalizing the customer after they've bought a high-risk car unknowingly. They don't realize at the time of purchase that they'll be paying more for auto insurance premiums due to the high theft rate of their vehicle. We all need to collaborate to address this gap, and I'm pleased to see my colleagues from the auto manufacturers here today and ready to play a key role. Which brings us to intervention. There are Canadian examples that could serve as international best practices. Ontario's Auto Theft Prosecution Response Team and Auto Theft Enforcement Team is a strong model that is already paying dividends. Expanding this model to other provinces would be very helpful and is worth exploring. Through Equité, the insurance industry's investigative body, insurers are committed to sharing data with law enforcement agencies and CBSA. Enhanced information sharing will help inform earlier, more targeted enforcement, further cutting off the supply of stolen vehicles. We can also look to other jurisdictions for guidance as well. In the US, Customs and Border Protection said that data analytics and partnerships are the most important factors in their successful efforts to identify and disrupt transnational criminal organizations. They actively share intelligence information with the National Insurance Crime Bureau to detect and prevent the export of stolen vehicles. On the border gap, we can also look to the South for solutions. In Canada, export documents can be amended 2 days after ship sets sail. In the US, Customs and Border Protection requires the exporter of a vehicle to present all export documents and the vehicle 72 hours prior to the export. And the results? US law enforcement experts estimate only 10% of their stolen vehicles are slated for export. In Canada, it's over 50%. Earlier intervention at rail and shipping yards is also paramount. On recovery, once the vehicles are out of Canada, it's complicated and costly to get them back. Sharing our law enforcement information with foreign partners, including Interpol, would help arm international customs officials with the knowledge they need to intervene. This is easier done through flow-through destinations and would allow us to return vehicles home and disrupt criminal supply. Next slide. In closing, I want to state the obvious. Auto theft is not a victimless crime, and it affects every Canadian, either directly or indirectly. Terry's presentation cited almost 70% say the rise in auto theft makes them concerned about their safety. We have to do better. Like any other business, increased costs will eventually be borne by the customer. Last year, auto theft added an average of $130 to auto insurance premiums in Ontario and $105 in Quebec. There have been many, many stories in the media of people dealing with the aftermath of a stolen vehicle. The one that stands out to me was reported last week by the CBC. Michael Walker's truck was stolen out of his Toronto driveway. And because he knew his truck was a target, he installed a tag system and knew where his truck was cooling off. So did the tag operators. And before the police could arrive, the thieves moved the truck into a shipping container. It took 17 days for his vehicle to be recovered, and he knew where it was. I know police resources are strained, and there are higher priority issues they must respond to. But I think we can all agree we can do better for people like Michael Walker. And this time, he got his vehicle back. Most don't. I'm here with CEOs from Canada's insurers and the broker community. We're ready to work with all of you around this table to find a solution to this crisis, to cut off funds to organized criminals, and most importantly, to ensure people can feel safe in their communities across the country. Thank you very much. Merci beaucoup.
Merci, Madame Power.
It doesn't really sound to me
Ici
like
pour représenter l'Association des administrateurs.
Thank you, Madame Power. For the Port Authority of Canada.
Think there's any
Daniel
value to this,
Gooch.
guys?
And from the Port of Montreal, Geneviève Deschamps. The floor is yours. Thank you. Good morning. I'm Daniel Robert Gooch of the Association of Port Authorities.
Present a national ports perspective on this important issue. I want to commend the government for setting up this summit and establishing an action plan to address this important issue of auto theft. ACPA represents the 17 Canada port authorities that move most of Canada's traded goods. With us today is Geneviève Deschamps, who will speak momentarily. And we join Canadians in our concern for the increased incidence of auto theft. We're committed to working with the government and other supply stakeholders to address this issue. I'm going to focus my time on clarifying how ports function, including their responsibilities for secure, safe, and reliable supply chains, and offer a couple of recommendations to enhance the role of ports within the overall collective multi-stakeholder response to auto theft. Canada's ports are complex operating environments with many separate organizations working together to move goods safely and security within a regulatory environment defined by Transport Canada. There are important distinctions between the roles and responsibilities of the Port Authority itself versus the roles of independently owned and operated tenants, port users, and government agencies. CPAs manage federal port lands, build and maintain infrastructure, manage and coordinate interaction between tenants and port users, and ensure safe and secure port operations overall. Port authorities in Canada, however, do not move boxes. Ports are a transit territory, with containers arriving filled and sealed from another location and on port lands for just a few days. Containers move in and out of port boundaries on trains, trucks, and ships, all of which are operated by third parties. Container terminals and yards are managed by terminal operators, receiving sealed containers bound for export by truck or train. All of these organizations are responsible for having their own security plans. They're required to have their own security plans, but these are not supposed to be shared with the Port Authority itself. Once these containers are cleared by Canada Border Services Agency, they are loaded at the port onto vessels by terminal operators and their employees. Through the Canada Marine Act, the Marine Transportation Security Regulations, and other regulations, Transport Canada has provided the operating framework for CPAs. Ports are delegated with specific and limited responsibilities for port security. To monitor and ensure the safe and secure movement of goods, including those in containers, ports must work closely with their partners, including police of local jurisdiction and Canada Border Services Agency. Port Authority responsibilities for security include the development of security plans for the unleased parts of the port they manage, staffing and training of port security officers, monitoring of port lands and waters, installation of technologies for surveillance of their areas, and issuance of credentials, including applications for transportation security clearances by port workers. Port authorities do not have authority for intervention in suspected matters of criminality or law enforcement.
Thanks for tuning in,
ACPA has worked closely with Transport Canada over the years to improve aspects of port security within their purview by standardizing port security training and credentials and co-developing contraventions and administrative penalty authorities. These have provided CPAs with enforcement tools for non-criminal matters such as trespassing. Given this work to date, we do see some opportunities to strengthen the secure movement of goods at Canada's ports, solutions that would not require dramatic changes to what exists now. Ports are always looking for ways to work more closely with CBSA, local police, RCMP, and Transport Canada to improve support, security, and operational efficiency. We recognize the important work that these government partners do to keep ports safe, and it is important that their respective roles in port security be clear to everyone involved.
So we'll just take a moment here to see what the crowd wants, because we can find something else to watch. The thing is, it wasn't a great day for besides this for things that were going on, and let's see. We've got this. We're gonna jump over to this. I see that this is pretty new, so we're gonna jump into this. And
I want to say a huge thank you to Benita Zerillo as a member of our team. She's incredible. Your advocacy, your passion for people, we're so lucky to have you as a part of the team. And I want to shout out Laura Dupont, also one of our candidates in the Tri-City region, someone who's also a fierce advocate for housing, for people, and proud to have you also on the team. I want to talk to you about the story of what we're going through in our country. And it's a story of corporate greed versus people. And it is a story that's been going on for decades. We have a housing market that is designed to make rich investors richer. And it is working exactly as designed by liberals and conservatives. And this housing market designed by liberals and conservatives to make rich investors rich is not working for people. It's not working for everyday folks. And it means for everyday folks, a constant fear that your rent's going to go up, constant fear that your mortgage is going to go up, a constant fear that you're going to lose your home. And that's what the people here at Tri-Bench felt at this cooperative. They lived in constant fear for years, where they did not know what was going to happen to their housing. They did not know if they were going to have a place to call home. And what that means, we heard from one of the residents, it means losing your community. It means losing your family. For a lot of people, where you live and the community around you is your family. Imagine living in constant fear you're going to lose your family. You're not just going to lose your home, you're going to lose your family, lose your sense of identity, and have nowhere to go. That is a story of a housing market designed for rich investors that ignores the reality of real people. And so we're saying enough is enough. This home for people was saved because of the Renters Protection Fund that the BC-NDP brought in. This fund, this Renters Protection Fund, kept this building for the community, kept these homes for people. And that's what we want to do across this country. Conservatives and liberals want to continue to favor rich corporate landlords, rich investors, let them keep on making money, and people end up suffering. We're saying enough is enough. Let's actually make people the priority. Let's make the residents of this community the priority. Let's make families, young people, seniors, let's make them the priority, and let's build a housing market that works for them. And one of the first...
Sorry to interrupt everybody. Sorry to interrupt again. But I have the Jordan Peterson-Pierre Poilievre interview. I think that we can show that. Would you guys rather watch the rest of the NDP speech, or would you rather watch Jordan Peterson interview Pierre Poilievre? So just let me know. Just the first person that says what to do, we're going to do. So just drop it in the comments if you want to continue with the NDP or we want to jump to Poilievre and Peterson.
When you look at Canada at the moment, what are our problems?
Well, the central underlying illness is a monstrous growth in the power and cost of the state at the expense of the agency and freedom of the people. I'm here simply restoring what already belonged to Canadians by virtue of their 800-year inheritance of English liberties going back to the Magna Carta. I'm just among the common people who are custodians of that freedom while we're alive. You know, Edmund Burke said it's a contract between the dead, the living, and the yet to be born. And we're the living generation has the duty to pass on that inheritance. And that's what I see myself doing, is to rekindle that inheritance and pass it on to my kids, and so they can pass it on to their kids. And I'll pass away into the fade away into the past one day, but hopefully we'll have secured the freedom that we inherited for many more generations to come. And that's what I mean when I want to give people back control of their life in the present. It's also to extend it into the future. So that's my purpose. That's why I'm running. That was cool. You know, people want to support me. My PIERRE4PM.ca that's Pierre 4, the number 4. PM.ca is how you can sign up, become a member, and do that. And I would be honored to have people's support in this enterprise.
Watch out for your girlfriend. You touch her, I'm gonna tell them everything you ever did.
Are you threatening me?
We gotta go. Where? Let's just keep driving.
Hello, everyone. I'm very pleased today to have with me Mr. Pierre Poilievre. He is the current frontrunner in the race for leadership of the Federal Conservative Party of Canada, and he is therefore a likely candidate for Prime Minister of Canada within the foreseeable future, within the next few years. The Conservatives in Canada have served historically alternatively to lead Canada, competing with the Liberals primarily at the federal or national and provincial or state level, although the Liberals, their primary opponents, have been more historically successful. So they've served more terms. Mr. Poilievre served as a senior cabinet minister in Prime Minister Stephen Harper's Conservative government prior to the recent election of Justin Trudeau and the Liberals, and has served as a member of Parliament for 7 terms. And with that brief introduction, I'm going to turn the discussion over to Mr. Poilievre, who can fill us in on a little biographical information so we know who he is, and then we'll turn to more specific issues. Thanks very much for agreeing to talk to me today, and welcome.
Thanks very much, Dr. Peterson. Great to be with you.
So we'll do Jordan and Pierre. How's that?
That's fine by me.
All right, away we go. So let's start. Who are you? Where do you come from? And how do you get interested in politics? And why are you the man for the job here?
Thank you. Well, like you, I'm from Alberta, although further south. I come from Calgary. And my folks are from Saskatchewan. They married in 77, moved to Calgary, where they adopted me. I was born of a 16-year-old unwed mother whose mother had just died. And so she was in no position to raise a child. So she put me up for adoption, and I was blessed to be adopted by Marlene and Don Poiliev, two teachers from Saskatchewan, and a pretty normal upbringing. Grew up in the 80s, and like I was born in 79, so my early childhood was in the 80s. It was kind of a brutal time to be a homeowner or a family because there was these monstrous interest rates. So some of my earliest memories as a child were the financial stress that my folks were going through. And a lot of people were losing their homes and their livelihoods at that time. And I think that made an early impression on my thinking, even though at the time I didn't really understand what was happening or why. I was able later on to look back at that strain and stress and then try to diagnose it when I was old enough to understand. And that kind of formulated some of my political ideologies. We can return to that later on. But I grew up middle class, couple of teachers who got divorced when I was in my mid-teens, and sort of bounced back and forth between mom and dad's place throughout my teenage years. Went to University of Calgary.
Yeah, so we do have a fair bit in common because one of my parents, my father, is a teacher. Both my parents are from Saskatchewan. They moved to Alberta. Lots of people from Saskatchewan did. I got interested in politics at an early age. I remember that period of inflation because, my father, and maybe your parents, did they lose their pensions when the banks collapsed? Because the teachers did.
Mine didn't lose their pensions. We did have to move because I think in retrospect that was because of the interest rate hikes. I'm guessing my folks were not able to pay the mortgage at the higher rates. And then we had to move to a smaller place, and we had to sell our car and downgrade our automobile and all of the above just to kind of keep our heads above water. And that would have been, I'm guessing, around sort of 83, 84. And that was a really kind of hellish time, particularly in Alberta, because the central government had unleashed a wicked assault on the energy sector called the National Energy Program. And simultaneously, the worst of the Trudeau socialist years were coming to bear on the entire national economy. So you had 12% inflation, 12% unemployment.
24% mortgage rates. That's real fun for everyone.
Yes. And highest misery index in Canadian history. That's unemployment plus inflation. And
that was under Justin's father.
Yes.
Surprise, surprise. Yes.
And here we are with the same policies leading to the same results. Just as the dog returns to its vomit and the sow returns to its mire, the burn fool's bandaged finger goes wobbling back to the fire, as Kipling would write. It was a miserable time for a lot of people. Now, I was blessed because my folks were teachers, so they ultimately didn't lose their livelihoods. We were able to, we had a modest upbringing, but I would never have called myself poor. And my folks worked hard to make sure we could play hockey and enjoy life, go on camping trips. So I would not cry poor, but it was a modest upbringing, one I'm very proud of, and one I'd like to pass on to my kids as well.
How old were you when you got interested in politics? And what were you like in high school?
Well, I was a scrappy kid who loved sports, and then I got a terrible tendonitis in my shoulder, which made it impossible for me to do any amateur wrestling or football or any other sports that I enjoyed. So I'd get home from school and be bored out of my skull. My mom used to go and attend progressive conservative meetings. And so I said, why don't you take me to one of these meetings? Because I've got nothing to do. And she took me, and I fell in love with it. And I just started reading books, all kinds about.
Oh God, you shouldn't do that.
I'm still recovering from all. And
So why in the world were you attracted to conservatism? Because that's not a particularly, what would you say? It's not necessarily an attractive proposition for the typical young person, although, maybe something could be done about that. So, but what attracted you to conservative philosophy?
It was a bit of a winding road. I started off by reading a lot of left-wing books and commentary, and was very, very briefly persuaded by that. But then I stumbled on a book called Capitalism and Freedom by Milton Friedman. And I didn't agree with 100% of what he wrote. I still don't. However, the fundamental logic of the free market system, to me, is inescapable.
Okay, what is that logic as far as you're concerned? Why is that? Why is it inescapable?
Because in a free and open market, you can't get ahead unless you make someone else better off. So I use the old apple orange analogy. If you have an apple and want an orange, and I have an orange and want an apple, and we trade, we're both better off, even though we still have an apple and orange between us. It's like when you go to a coffee shop and you buy a coffee, you say, thank you to the lady who gave it to you. And then she says, not you're welcome, but she says, thank you back. Now, why is that? Well, the answer is because each of you has gained something more valuable than you had before. You have the cup of coffee that's worth more than the $2.50 you paid for it. The coffee shop has the $2.50.
And why do you think the free part of that is important? So that's the trade part. Why is the free part important?
Because that's the only way to guarantee both sides believe they're better off, right? Because in the form of taxation, government forcefully imposes a transaction. It is considered to be a transaction, taxes, right? You're paying for a whole plethora of services, but you didn't choose it. So even if you've decided that the cost of your tax bill is not worth the benefit of the government services, you have to pay it anyway. Whereas back to the coffee shop, you have to, if you don't believe the coffee is worth more than the money, you won't pay it. And if they don't believe the money is worth more than the coffee, they won't sell it. So the only way in a market system to make yourself better off is to make someone else simultaneously better off.
So why did you, now look, lots of young people today either are not exposed to the ideas that you just put forward, or they don't find them persuasive, say in contrast to what appears on the surface to be the more compassionate left-wing view that's characterized frequently and sometimes realistically, by concern for the working class. Like I worked for the NDP when I was a kid, and at that time in Alberta, Grant Notley ran the NDP, and he was an old union guy in some fundamental sense, and so were most of the people he associated with.
So, a little bit of news here, guys. I just got an email saying that I probably need to request permission to use that much of that video, which I need to do some research on that. So we're gonna cut that part off. If you would like, in the comments, I'm going to put a link to the video that we were just watching, because I see if that'll work. No, it won't. Oh, yes, it does work. So hopefully, if you're interested in watching that, you can catch it right there, because I don't mean to tease anybody like that. That's not what we're trying to do. But again, I just got a heads up warning that you probably shouldn't use that much of someone else's content without permission. And I agree. So that was a lot of fun though. And just fingers crossed we won't get in too much trouble for it, because like I'm not trying to be that guy. Like I will promote Jordan Peterson. He's an amazing character. He's an amazing doctor. He's an interesting professor. Like I listen to his podcast all the time. So again, not trying to be like that. Just saying, we were looking for something to watch and we found it, and I was excited just to try it. So, anyways. We're going to wrap up. I'm Ehren. This is Question Period Canada. We have a blast here all the time. It's so much fun to hang out in the chat room, saying hello to everybody. I look forward to seeing everybody. And I think I know probably 40 people that like are regularly here. Like I can think of 40 people. It's crazy. So exciting. Anyways, we'll be back tomorrow with some more Canadian federal politics for sure. Tomorrow and Friday, Wednesday and Friday are, Wednesday and Thursday are the big investigations. They're going to have some serious witnesses in committee, so that should be pretty crazy. We will be starting early, covering all of those tomorrow, so they'll be fun to check out because there's going to be some controversy, and we're definitely going to get to see more conservatives tomorrow than we got to see today. Watching all those liberals was brutal. Watching those ladies, the television executives, that was bad too. But we'll have more enjoyable stuff to watch tomorrow. It'll be entertaining, I assure you. So anyhow, I'm going to run. Thank you all so much for tuning in. Looking forward to hanging out with you tomorrow. So that's it. Stay warm, have something healthy to eat today, and we'll catch you back here tomorrow.